Okay, so picture this, right? It's October 15th, 2022. Crisp autumn evening in Sweden.
Ooh, sounds nice.
Yeah, it does. So we have Tove, a 21-year-old, wants to be a doctor out with her friends.
Okay.
They're going to Nut, a popular spot for dancing and bowling. Sounds pretty normal, right?
Yeah, like a Friday night.
But this night takes a dark turn. Tove disappears, and it
Oh,
becomes this huge mystery in Sweden.
wow.
We've got like articles and court documents and even some personal accounts. So let's try to figure out what happened that night.
Yeah, how a normal night out could turn into something so terrible, especially you said at a place like Nut.
Exactly, like some place you'd think would be safe.
Right.
So before we get into that night, let's learn a little about Tove.
Yeah, good idea.
What can you tell us about her?
She was very close with her twin sister,
Oh, wow.
loved football. They even played together like on a Division II team.
No way.
Yeah. She had moved to Linköping for school, but she was back in Vetlanda, her hometown, for the summer, working as a teacher's assistant.
Okay, so back home, catching up with people and...
And that's where things get a little complicated.
Okay.
So two other important people in this story are Johanna and Maja.
Okay.
Johanna was a former friend of Tove's, but their friendship, from what we've gathered, was kind of rocky.
Okay.
Johanna could be very controlling,
I see.
and Maja was often with Johanna.
Okay.
And, well, they all ended up at Neat that night. It ended up being, well, a fatal encounter.
Wait, fatal? You're saying this wasn't random? They all knew each other before that night.
Yeah, it seems so. Knowing their history, especially with Johanna, is really important to figure out what happened.
So Johanna was a controlling person.
That's what sources close to them say, yeah.
Right.
And that probably caused problems between her and Tove, who was, independent and strong.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. So what exactly happened at Nate that night?
Witnesses said there was a big argument between Tove and Johanna inside.
Oh, wow.
But then it seemed like things calmed down, and they were seen talking, like having a friendly conversation outside.
But that's when things get confusing.
What do you mean? What happened after they left Nut?
So at first, both Johanna and Maja said that Tove left their apartment right after they got there.
Okay.
But when investigators looked at phone records and location data, it turned out, well, that wasn't true at all.
They lied.
Yeah, and it made investigators really start to suspect them.
So what did investigators find that pointed to Johanna and Masha?
So 2 weeks after Tove disappeared, her body was found, miles away from Vetlanda,
Oh, no.
in a forest, and it was burned.
That's awful. How did they connect Johanna and Masha to this?
The police were really thorough.
Okay.
Phone records, tracking their movements, put together a timeline. And importantly, they found that Johanna's phone had been in the same area where they found Tove's body.
Oh, wow.
And with their stories falling apart, they arrested them for kidnapping.
Wow. The digital evidence was huge in this case, huh?
It really was. So did they confess? With all that evidence?
Well, after 2.5 months in custody, Johanna finally confessed, telling this horrifying story of what really happened that night at her apartment.
Oh, man. What did she say happened? What led to Tove's death?
Johanna said that the argument with Tove started up again in the bathroom.
Okay.
She said that in a moment of rage, she strangled Tove.
Oh, gosh.
And she said that Maja was there too, holding Tove's hands.
Wow.
Then, panicked, they decided to hide the body instead of getting help. And, even more disturbing, the day after Tove died, Johanna bought lighter fluid and sheets.
Oh, wow.
And that purchase, well, that became a big piece of evidence, showing they were trying to cover up what they did.
That is so chilling. What a terrible, confusing situation for Tove. What about Maja? Did she say she was involved in Tove's death?
That's where the case takes another turn.
Really?
Even though Johanna admitted to the murder, Maja insisted that she didn't have anything to do with killing Tove. And they couldn't find any hard evidence that she was directly involved in Tove's death.
So because of that, her sentence was completely different from Johanna's.
Yeah.
It was.
Wow, so many twists and turns already. And pretty disturbing details, too.
Yeah, it's tough to hear about for sure. But let's move on to what happened next, like the legal stuff.
Yeah, the trial. I bet that was a big deal in Sweden, huh?
Oh yeah, definitely. Everyone was following it. All the details of what happened to Tove were coming out.
What were the main arguments during the trial?
Well, Johanna, she confessed, right? So she got a life sentence at first. That's the toughest sentence in Sweden.
Wow. But you said earlier that it was reduced to 16 years.
Right.
Why did that happen?
So in the end, the court decided that even though Johanna was responsible for Tove's death, there wasn't enough solid proof that she had planned to kill her, like premeditated murder.
I see. What did the prosecution say about that? Like, about it being planned?
Well, they focused on that lighter fluid.
Oh, they said buying that showed that she had planned to hide the body, like it was all calculated.
Yeah, that makes sense. What did the defense say to that?
They argued that buying the lighter fluid, it could have been like a spur-of-the-moment thing,
Yeah.
done out of panic.
Okay.
They said she was just overwhelmed, not some, like, cold-blooded killer.
So they said it wasn't planned.
Right. And with some of the other evidence, the court ended up changing the charge and reducing the sentence.
So that lighter fluid, that was a really important detail.
Yeah, definitely. And it shows how tricky the legal system can be.
Yeah.
It's not always clear-cut. It's about how much someone is to blame and proving they meant to do it.
Right, proving their intent. Okay, so what about Maja's sentence? You said it was way less than Johanna's. Why?
Yeah, Maja's role is, well, it's still something people debate about. She said she was there when it happened and even held Tove's hands, but the prosecution couldn't prove that she wanted to kill Tove or that what she did directly caused her death.
Okay, so they couldn't prove that what she did actually contributed to Tove dying.
Yeah, exactly. And that's super important in court. Without clear proof that she meant to kill Tove or that she was directly involved in the actual killing, they couldn't convict her of murder. So they found her guilty of helping to hide the body,
Oh, I see.
and she only got 1.5 years.
Wow, that's a huge difference from 16 years. That must have been controversial.
Oh, yeah, for sure. A lot of people were angry about it. They said it wasn't fair. They felt that Maja, even if she didn't kill Tove, she was still there and helped hide the body. They thought she should have gotten a harsher sentence.
Yeah, I can understand why they would feel that way.
But some legal experts said the sentences, as different as they seem, they actually did reflect the evidence they had. They said the prosecution just couldn't prove that Maja was guilty of a more serious crime.
Okay.
So it's a really tough situation. And the legal stuff just adds to all the emotional turmoil in this case.
It definitely highlights those challenges of, like, finding true justice, especially when people are saying different things and there isn't a ton of physical evidence. And for Tove's family, I can't imagine how hard all this was.
You're right. It's awful. Losing your daughter, your sister, like that, and then seeing the people responsible, maybe not getting what feels like enough punishment.
Yeah.
Tove's family have been very open about how they disagree with the sentences, especially Maja's. They think she was more involved than she admits. This case, it's not just about what happened in court. It's about people's lives, a terrible loss, and a family trying to find justice and some peace.
It's a good reminder that these aren't just headlines,
Yeah.
Real people are dealing with this pain and grief.
It is. So in the last part of our deep dive,
Mhm.
we're going to look at the impact of Tove's death on her family, on the community, and even on Sweden in general.
I think that's really important to talk about. We can't forget about the people involved. So as we get into what happened after, all the legal stuff, it's important to remember this isn't just a story, right? This was a tragedy that really hurt real people.
You're right. And those effects, they reach way beyond just the courtroom, don't they?
Yeah. So what was the lasting impact on Tove's family? I mean, gosh, it's just so hard to imagine losing someone you love like that.
The grief they've gone through, it's unimaginable. And on top of that, they had to deal with a legal system and, maybe feeling like they didn't really get justice. I don't know if they'll ever truly recover from that.
It's like they were hit with this terrible loss, and then on top of that, the legal process maybe didn't give them what they needed.
Exactly. This case really showed that even when someone is found guilty, the legal outcome doesn't always match what the victor and families need to heal.
Yeah, that's a really tough reality. You mentioned Vetlanda, Tove's town. What was the impact on the community there?
Vetlanda is a small town. Everybody knows each other. It's the kind of place where you feel safe. And then something like this happens. It shatters that feeling of safety. People start to feel vulnerable, like they can't trust anything anymore.
It's a reminder that these things, even though they might seem like just news stories, they really affect the places where they happen.
For sure. People in Vetlanda, they had to face this dark side of life that they probably never thought could exist in their own town. Everyone was grieving, and that feeling of shared trauma, it stuck around long after the news moved on.
Beyond Tove's family and Vetlanda, did this case start any bigger conversations in Sweden?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It really brought the issue of violence against women to the forefront in Sweden.
Okay.
Sweden is seen as a country that's really good on gender equality, but this case forced people to see that violence against women, it's still a problem.
So no country's perfect.
Exactly. And it also made people talk about, the dynamics in female friendships.
Yeah.
About how sometimes there can be manipulation and control, even in subtle ways. It made people wonder how those kinds of behaviors could go unnoticed and what we can do about them.
So it wasn't just about one crime. It made people think about bigger issues in society.
Exactly. It made people look at their own relationships to notice any warning signs and think about how they can make things safer for women.
So what are some of the key takeaways from this case? What should we, think about after learning about all this?
Well, one big thing is that we need to pay attention to any toxic behavior in all our relationships, not just romantic ones.
Okay. Yeah.
We need to set boundaries and trust our gut feelings. Don't ignore those warning signs, even if it's someone we care about.
It's easy to think someone will change or that things will get better.
Yeah,
But this case shows that ignoring those red flags, it can be really dangerous.
it's a tough lesson, but a really important one. And we need to be more aware of those subtle ways that manipulation can happen in any relationship.
Okay.
We need to learn about it ourselves and teach others so that we can see it and stop it before it gets out of control.
So education is key.
Totally. We need to make it okay for people to speak up, set boundaries, and get help.
Yeah.
We have to stop being silent about toxic behavior and talk openly about what healthy relationships should be like.
You mentioned earlier that this case started a national conversation about violence against women in Sweden. It makes me think, what can we actually do to stop these tragedies from happening, both individually and, as a society?
That's a big question and one that we need to keep asking.
Hmm.
I think we need to start by challenging those societal norms, the ones that lead to violence and inequality.
Yeah.
We can support organizations that are trying to prevent violence and help survivors.
Okay.
We can learn about healthy relationships ourselves and teach others and step in when we see something wrong.
That's important.
It's all about creating a culture where we respect each other and hold each other accountable, where violence isn't okay and everyone feels safe to speak up.
I think it also starts with having those hard conversations.
For sure.
Even when they're uncomfortable, we have to talk about consent, respect, and healthy boundaries. Early on, even.
I totally agree. This deep dive, it's been tough, but really important.
Yeah.
It showed us this tragic story and all the bigger issues that came with it.
To everyone listening, thanks for joining us as we went through all the details of Tove's story and those broader issues it brought up.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be part of this conversation.
And remember, if you or someone you know is dealing with abuse or a bad relationship, there's help out there. Don't be afraid to reach out. We'll be back next week with another deep dive, so stay tuned.